Hi, Brian Lehrer here. Up next, Brian Lehrer Weekend. 3 of our favorite segments from the week packaged together for you to listen to on the weekend. So enjoy, and I'll see you back on the radio Monday at 10 a.m. on WNYC and WNYC.org. It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning, everyone. We begin in New Jersey, where Governor Sherrill has been pushing to bring down some of the highest electric bills in the country. You remember it was her core campaign promise, and she made some fresh news on that last week. In her first 6 months, Governor Sherrill has signed a flurry of energy laws, and they include this July 7th trio of bills aimed at utilities and data centers paired with one-time bill credits. And just this week, the governor signed a nuclear procurement bill meant to add power supply over the long haul. Yes, the Democratic governor wants to give another look to nuclear power. The through line is affordability, of course, though it's believed the real payoff is mostly years away. That said, in the very near short term, every electric customer will receive a one-time $25 credit on their August bill. Michael Saul-Warren covers New Jersey energy and the environment for WNYC in Gothamist, where he's been tracking all of this. Hey, Michael, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Brian. Thanks for having me.
So let's tick through those 3 bills. One of them makes New Jersey utilities join a regional grid organization. What does that mean?
Yeah, the regional grid organization, it is the power grid. So in New York, that's the ISO. But in New Jersey, that is PJM, which is a large regional grid, serves about more than a dozen states, including all of New Jersey. So all of the 4 major electric utilities serving the Garden State are already members of PJM, but up until now, that membership was technically voluntary. This law is going to make it mandatory, and that has some financial implications, both for customers, but also for the utility companies.
But if I'm understanding you correctly, it just reinforces a status quo. Whatever benefits being a member of that regional grid confers were already in place?
Yes. The main thing that's going to change here under the law is that the incentive that utilities were being paid to be members is going to go away because now it's mandatory, so membership doesn't have to be incentivized. So that what that means for customers is that a fee that had been on their bill that was basically saying a little cut to the utilities for being members of this regional grid isn't going to be on the bill anymore.
Aha. All right. Next bill, the data center bill. It's one the business community fought. It's probably the one of the 3 they fought the hardest. Tell me if you think that's right. What does it actually require of data centers?
Yeah, it was definitely a talker. That's for sure. I think that the utilities might have fought the previous bill we were discussing about the membership incentives just as hard, if not harder. But the data center bill, what it does is it puts data centers in their own class when it comes to defining what ratepayers are. So most of us, pretty much all of us, are residential customers of our utility, of our electric company. If you are a business owner, you're commercial. If you are heavy industry, there's a class for you for industrial users. This creates a dedicated class for data centers, and that means that New Jersey electric companies are going to be able to charge them different rates than they would charge the average homeowner. And the goal here by state leaders is to ensure that data centers are going to be charged what they're calling their fair share. You know, these are facilities that use way more electricity than residential users. So they want to be charged. They want to be charging them differently to account for that.
Right. And you reported that data centers are driving demand faster than new supply can come online. Is it known how much of New Jersey's recent utility bill spike traces back to the data center supply and demand mismatch?
I don't have a specific number to give you, but analysts agree that the proliferation of data centers in New Jersey and throughout, the rest of the PJM footprint. Like I said, that's 13 states, and it includes parts of Virginia where data centers in around DC have been coming online in droves. So the proliferation of data centers throughout the region is driving a supply and demand kind of crisis for PJM, and that's causing the base supply price, the money that utilities have to pay to get the power to send to us, to skyrocket, and so that gets translated to the rest of us in the form of our bill.
New Jersey listeners, do you have any question or reaction with respect to the steps that Governor Sherrill has taken so far since taking office on utility bills? The number one thing that she ran on, 212-433. WNYC, call or text for our New Jersey reporter, Michael Saul Warren, 212-433-9692. Before we leave data centers and go to the third bill, I don't know if you've seen the breaking news yet this morning from New York, but just reading from our site, Gothamist Governor Hochul has ordered a one-year moratorium on large data centers in New York, which would be the first statewide temporary ban in the country. Hochul said her order pauses state environmental permits for 1 year in order to build a regulatory framework that protects the environment and ratepayers. So that's pretty big. The first statewide ban on large data centers in the country. Do you know if Governor Sherrill has considered that particular move for Jersey?
Yes. I don't know necessarily what she's considered or what she hasn't, but I know she has faced a lot of pressure to enact such a moratorium here. There's for months now have been calls from environmental advocates and generally opponents of data centers in the state for such a moratorium in New Jersey, and it's not just activists. There's a number of local municipalities that I've noticed passing resolutions urging the governor and lawmakers to take such a step as well.
But it sounds like she rejected that step that Hochul just took.
Yeah, I don't necessarily want to say she's rejected it, but she definitely hasn't done it yet. So it may still be on the table. I don't know.
Rejected it for now.
Yeah.
The third of the three utility bill-oriented bills that she did sign last week is about transmission oversight. That means poles, wires, substations. What problem is the state trying to fix there?
So what they're targeting with this law specifically are what's called supplemental transmission projects, and utilities spend a lot of money on these kind of projects, and they are allowed to charge the ratepayer for that work. So a little increase in rates to cover these supplemental projects. The state's gripe here is that there was a kind of a gap in oversight. And lack of ability for the Board of Public Utilities to give final approval on these supplemental projects. So this puts another layer of oversight and regulation on that kind of work, and it incentivizes utilities to use more advanced technologies. Like if the state's going to give approval to this supplemental work going forward, the state wants it to be done with the best available technology to kind of, keep things, not have to keep revisiting the same kind of work more frequently.
Right. So I guess even though that's a measure that it sounds like would authorize the spending of a lot of money, which could push rates up, tries to authorize that spending for, maintaining and modernizing the infrastructure in the most efficient way possible. Is that the way she wants us to look at it?
Yeah, basically this is spending that's already happening, and it's spending that ratepayers are already being charged for. What the state is hoping this law does is give regulators more authority to step in and say, do we really need this particular project? Yes or no, right? And if we do need a fix here or a fix there, are we doing it in the best possible way, or could we bring in more modern technology?
These credits, a one-time $25 credit for ratepayers in New Jersey on their August bill, and low-income residents below whatever the cutoff for that is will also receive a separate $50 rebate on their August, September, and October bills through the state's residential energy assistance payment. Why these numbers? I had one Jersey friend say to me, $25, really? It's more insulting than changes anything.
Yeah, I think your feelings on the $25 may vary depending on where you sit on the income spectrum, right? I will compare this to what the state did last year, and remember the really big spike in energy bills we experienced was last summer. And so in reaction to that, former Governor Murphy gave a similar credit, but he did bigger credits over a longer period of time. So this is a sort of scaled back version for one more year. The $25 credit is kind of Governor Sherrill saying, look, this is us doing what we can in the short term to give you a little bit of relief while we enact these longer term efforts that will have larger impacts for you and your wallet down the line. That's the message they're trying to send here. The additional credits for low-income households are definitely going to be more impactful. They are larger. They are 3 months instead of 1 month, and they're going to folks who could, frankly, use the money more than others.
On the bill that the governor signed that you were describing that tries to get data centers to pay for more of the demand on the grid, I think John in Westfield has a question. John, you're on WNYC. Hello.
Yes, hi there. I just wanted to know kind of what the differential, on a kilowatt hour basis, the percentage that you'd see different between what I would get charged versus a data center, for instance.
Good concrete question. Is that known yet?
It's a great question, and I look forward to knowing it. We don't know now, so my understanding is that now that this framework exists that give the utilities an option to charge the data centers a different rate, the utilities are going to have to go through the rate setting process. So I think we're kind of at the start of that journey.
Listener texts, any consideration of a public utility option to increase competition with private utilities?
Oh, I had not heard that one. And I do want to say, I think that what they're talking about perhaps is like a government-owned public utility. I just want to be clear.
I think that's what the question is suggesting, yes.
Yeah, because the utilities we have are considered public utilities, and that they're corporations that are owned by public shareholders. But no, in terms of a government-owned electric company, I hadn't heard that one.
Listener writes, why doesn't Sherrill restart the offshore wind project that the federal government pulled funding out of before going to nuclear power? We'll talk about her proposal to reconsider nuclear for New Jersey, but the listener wants to know, before going to nuclear, why doesn't she restart the offshore wind project that we know Trump was so against?
Well, the answer is in the question. It's really about Trump. We asked Governor Sherrill about offshore wind on our air a while ago, and she said that she would like to get offshore wind going again, but it's just not feasible with the Trump administration in place. And that's because of specific policies that his administration have enacted that have created a de facto moratorium on new wind projects going through the approval process. Some of the stuff that you see in other states that is still moving forward are projects that had already gotten their approval at the federal level and still had the financial structure to make sense for those companies to move forward. But even they're facing pressure to get out of the game. I see a number of them have been offered buyouts by the Trump administration to kind of cut bait and invest in different projects.
And finally, of the four measures from the last 2 weeks, this week, yesterday, in fact, I see the governor sign the Power New Jersey Act to kick off procurement for new nuclear power. What does that law actually set in motion? And do you think the politics of the Democratic Party are changing with respect to nuclear power?
Two great questions, Brian. On the law itself, it basically just sets the groundwork for the state to move as quickly as possible through the process of getting a nuclear project up and running whenever the federal government is ready, basically. So most nuclear regulation still goes through federal authorities. Most of the funding for nuclear projects is still going to go through federal or a lot of it is going to come from federal sources. And that's something that the Trump administration is trying to get off the ground in fits and starts. But in anticipation of this big federal push for new nuclear, New Jersey has laid the groundwork to be ready. And specifically, the state is planning on there being a fourth nuclear reactor built in Salem County. Down at far South Jersey, there's an artificial island where 3 nuclear plants already are. There would be a fourth one put there. The site is already pre-approved for such work. Earlier this year, state lawmakers and Governor Sherrill revamped the state's coastal land use rules to allow for nuclear. It lifted what had been a kind of default moratorium on nuclear development in the state. So everything that's been done so far, including the law signed yesterday, is just getting the state ready to go when the federal authorities are ready to go and when developers are ready to make a bid.
We'll end this with just an addendum from a listener to the person I cited on the $25 utility credit on New Jerseyans' August bills. The, kind of shrug of, really, $25? Listener writes, I'm a New Jersey, where'd it go? It writes, there it is. I'm a New Jersey resident with energy bills. Give me $25 any day, and I'm happy. So that listener gets the last word with Michael Saul-Warren, who covers New Jersey energy and the environment for WNYC and Gothamist. Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for having me.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning again, everyone. Unless you work at one, the supermarket might be like the most ordinary place in American life that you take the most for granted. You go a couple of times a week, maybe you barely think about it, and part of the comfort is not having to think about how any of it works. But if you ever worked in a grocery store, you'd know that a supermarket is really an ecosystem, and the people keeping it alive are working harder for less than many of us pushing a cart would guess. My next guest spent a year on the other side of the register and wrote a book based on notes she took after each shift. In the fall of 2020, writer Ann Larson took a job as a cashier at a grocery store in Utah. What she found is a job that's physically brutal, badly paid, and far more skilled than you probably give it credit for. With me now is Ann Larson, fellow with the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, and the author now of Clean Up on Aisle 5, Essential Work, Poverty Wages, and The View from Behind the Supermarket Register. And thanks for coming on. Welcome to WNYC.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
And listeners, we're going to invite your first-person stories here. Do you currently or have you ever worked at a supermarket? 212-433-WNYC. What would be the headline from you? What's the job actually like from behind the register, deli counter, stock room, wherever you are or wherever you work? 212-433-WNYC. Whatever you think the rest of the general public should know that they don't see as ordinary shoppers. 212-433-9692. On things that were not great working conditions or great pay, have you ever found a way to push back or make it better? Call or text us with your supermarket employment stories, WNYC, 212-433-9692 for Ann Larson. Why, Ann, out of all the things you could have undertaken as a, should we call it a undercover act of journalism, why this?
Well, like a lot of people, I found myself unemployed during the pandemic. So while I eventually wrote a book about my experience on the job, and after a few months there, I realized that I needed to write about what I was experiencing and observing. At first, I just got the job because that was what was available in my community. I had been living in New York City for about 20 years. I moved there to attend the City University of New York, actually, to go to graduate school. But after a while, my professional class jobs kind of dried up and I was facing unemployment. So I moved back to my home region. I'm from the Mountain States and I moved back to Utah. And my timing was really poor because I moved back right as the pandemic was getting underway. And so my city was shutting down. People weren't hiring. I sent out a lot of resumes to white collar jobs and didn't hear much back. And so at the time, I was living near a supermarket that I started shopping in. It was a very, very large store. I would go there to shop and I would see all of these employees. And here they were. They were showing up to work every day, punching a clock. They were still smiling and offering great customer service. And while many other businesses were closed and schools were closed, here were these people here to make sure that rest of us could buy groceries. And I was super impressed by that. And I also think I felt a little bit guilty that I wasn't there with them. And so I thought, why not? I can get a job in the store. I will earn some money. I can get health insurance because I didn't have that at the time. And I'll sort of wait this pandemic out, see how long this lasts. And it ended up being about 13 months. And by the end, I definitely knew, what I had seen was so troubling and enlightening that I wanted to write a book about it.
So you didn't go in with the intent of writing a book or doing journalism necessarily about your experience, mostly just to fill that weird time during the pandemic with some employment?
Exactly, exactly.
You've said that in supermarkets there are two versions of community happening at once. What are they?
So the supermarket I describe in my book is kind of a split screen. On the one side, the supermarket is a really wonderful place. If you think about your neighborhood grocery store, it's hard to imagine living without it. It's a pillar of the community. It's almost always open. You can go in anytime and find, thousands of products on sale, day or night. My store was certainly that way. It was a community for shoppers, especially during the pandemic. People came in just to see other people, to be around community, to get their basic needs met, to chat with each other, to chat with workers. For workers, too, the supermarket could be a community. I found a lot of solidarity there, workers who helped each other, who gave each other rides home from work. There was all sorts of positive effects of being in the supermarket and of the supermarket just being open during that time. That I think that's true for supermarkets all the time. But then on the other side of the split screen is a very dark place where workers are earning very low wages, where they aren't able. Imagine you are working in a supermarket and you are surrounded by food all the time, but you can't afford to buy it. Many of my colleagues earned so little that they couldn't afford their own grocery bill. There was a study done a few years ago that said the country's second largest grocery company, its workers, three-quarters of its workers said they had been food insecure, what people call food insecure in the past, meaning they're going hungry. So this is a huge problem where you have, on the one side, a community center, happy, smiling workers. On the other side of the split screen, people are really suffering from economic precarity. There's also a lot of injury in the supermarket. We may think of cashiering as kind of light, easy work, but what I discovered on the job is there is nothing further from the truth. Virtually everyone I worked with who had been at the job very long suffered from physical injury. Think about a cashier who's scanning groceries all day long, thousands of times over months and years. Cashiers develop carpal tunnel and other injuries that health professionals call MSDs, musculoskeletal disorders. And these are extremely common in the industry. In fact, MSDs are one of the most common injuries in the workplace. So again, the split screen, there's this community, a really positive place, a wonderful place, but on the other side, it's pretty dark.
Yeah, I saw where you wrote about Irene, a cashier working through a serious back injury who got reported as rude because she was in too much pain to smile. And I think we have an injury on the supermarket job story on the phone here. Sherrill in Port Washington. You're on WNYC. Thank you for calling in.
Good morning. So I started working as a supermarket cashier as a way to earn some money when I was a kid, and I started in my father's and grandfather's small supermarket. And, you stand all day, there's no stool. And after a while, I developed a broken blood vessel in my leg, and it is exhausting work.
Did you report the broken blood vessel, and did you get any kind of either sympathy or accommodation from the manager?
The manager was my grandfather, and I don't know that I reported it, but that was how I was able to earn some money. We're going back into the 60s and 70s. Before they made change for you on the machine, you had to do the math and count up from the amount that the groceries cost, and you had to pull the groceries towards you. There was no electronic belt.
Cheryl, thank you very much. The days even before the electronic belt. John in Manhattan, you're on WNYC. Hi, John.
Oh, hey, Brian. I'm John from Manhattan. I promise I won't curse this time. And I worked in a local market.
Oh, you're that John from Manhattan. I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm the only one. But anyway, I worked in a local market during COVID as well for about 4 years in their online shopping department. And I worked with we'll probably have 100 employees. It's big business. Just wanted to say New York City, the pay is not bad. I live in the neighborhood and it's rent stabilized my apartment, so I could pretty much kind of afford to live and work nearby for one. So maybe it's different out in the country, outside of New York where it's $7 an hour, which is probably virtually impossible to live. But it's really hard work. Everyone there was an immigrant, either from West Africa or from south of the border. I don't know any of their statuses, but the owners were kind. I'm sure they all got paid well, but it's really hard, especially out of sight of the customers. Physically, a big business does big business, a lot of heavy things. That's all I really wanted to say is that, the pot banging was deserved. It still is deserved of anyone who works in a hospital or a supermarket or a fireman, whatever.
Oh, the pots banging, thanking the essential workers who showed up to work every day when other people were able to stay home and get served. John, thank you for that. And that must have been a part of your experience. And because you talk about taking this job during the pandemic, and while almost everybody else was being encouraged to stay home in 2020, other people were told that they were essential and basically had to go to work. And that included a lot of supermarket workers, right?
Yes, one of the reasons I wrote this book is I don't want us to forget what was revealed about the important jobs in our society during that moment. This phrase that you used, essential workers, was spreading at that time, and the people that could stay home and do their jobs from their laptops were safer. They got to feel more secure, but there was a class of people, obviously healthcare workers, but there were warehouse workers, meat packers, and also retail grocery workers who showed up to the job. And so these are essential jobs that society can't live without, and it doesn't make sense that they are paid so little. I want to just comment on a couple of things that your callers have said that are really important. The woman with the blood vessel, a broken blood vessel in her leg, this was a very common injury, standing all day behind a register. People who have been to Europe and other countries will recognize that grocery cashiers sit in other places in the world because many of them are unionized, and so they've negotiated a more comfortable serving position. But cashiers in the US generally do stand all day long for 8 hours. And the reason I was told when I got the job is that a standing cashier looks more ready to serve. My manager said nobody wants to feel like they're having to rouse a sitting cashier from a chair in order to be served. So it really is a position of servitude, and that I'm standing as a way of showing you that I want to perform good customer service and a way of flattering the customer. The same thing goes with bagging. You mentioned a woman I write about in my book named Irene who struggled with a back injury. That injury was exacerbated because she had to bag groceries for customers. When you go to a supermarket in the US, the cashier will often put your items in the bag. And this opening the bag, putting things in, and moving the bag over time, thousands of times a day for months and years, this creates back pain. Right? And this is also a customer service issue because in the US, we're used to having cashiers bag our groceries for us while they're standing. So I want customers to understand that the customer service is not inherently demeaning. I had a wonderful experience in the store in a lot of ways. Customers could be very kind, could be very generous, they expressed a lot of gratitude to us for working during the pandemic. But there's this structural problem where this idea of customer service and of being kind of flattering the customer and doing all this work for them creates injury. And this is something that we have to deal with as a society. One more thing I want to mention, the woman who's talked about having to add up your purchases, before the age of sort of digital scanners and things like that. This raises another important question. Another important issue is we may think of grocery work as unskilled, as kind of this slur that we hear that cashiers are this is an unskilled job. That is not the case at all. As the woman mentioned, back in the day, she had to actually do the math to add up the items that a customer brought to the check stand. While cashiers don't do that anymore, they have plenty of other skills. One of the themes of the book is how long it took me to learn to use the register. These are complicated machines that require a lot of technical skills that are not necessarily easy to learn. Cashiers have to have lots of communication skills. 100 people are coming through your register a day, and you have to be able to communicate with them. Is this somebody who wants to chat with me about sports and the weather, or is this somebody who's in kind of a bad mood and just wants to be ignored? Customers ask you about where's the applesauce or where are the 9-volt batteries. You have to have extensive knowledge of your store's inventory to be able to do your job well. So one of the reasons I wrote the book, again, the injuries are just deplorable, and also this is highly skilled work that should be better respected, better paid, and their contribution to our society acknowledged.
And listeners, if you're just joining us, our guest is Ann Larson, a fellow with the Economic Hardship Reporting Project and the author now of Cleanup on Aisle 5, Essential Work, Poverty Wages, and the View from Behind the Supermarket Register. We're getting some really interesting text. One asks, are different supermarket chains different? And some examples that they give. Aldi cashiers are seated. Could you please talk about Trader Joe's? Another text. The employees there seem happy and well paid. So talk about a spectrum, if there's a spectrum that you see here.
There are only about 3 or 4 very large conglomerates that sell most of the groceries we buy in America. We have an incredibly concentrated retail grocery industry. So most stores that you shop in are owned by one of these big 4. So you may think that you are shopping in a different store that's maybe a smaller chain or even a mom and pop. But if you do the research, you will often find that store is owned by a larger company like Kroger, Costco, and Trader Joe's is actually owned by a giant German conglomerate. It kind of, the marketing of Trader Joe's makes it look a little bit like a boutique store, but that is definitely not the case. It's one of the largest and most profitable corporations in the world. So one of the things I talk about in the book is this kind of illusion that when you walk into a store in your neighborhood, you may think it's a neighborhood store, but it's actually a large company. And the reason why this is a problem is because this is harmful for both shoppers and workers. Because what it means for shoppers is that the companies can raise prices. We saw this during the pandemic. Prices went up on things like eggs and meat and other goods. And corporations said that they were because of the pandemic, that they were passing along their extra costs, from supply chain problems and all of that. And that seemed kind of like.
But I think on that specific point, I think a lot of people might say, wait, as a shopper, as a consumer, one of the advantages of the chains is that, because they can purchase in such bulk, the prices are lower. And that can be a problem too, because, I don't know, Walmart or whatever that also sells a lot of groceries and can buy at a big discount and therefore sell at lower prices, pushes out local mom and pop grocery stores, but that the big chains can have lower prices because of that scale that they can buy at.
The chains can buy at high volume, and that gives them authority over prices. And if you look historically, when I researched the book, what I found is that concentration of the grocery industry has pushed up prices for consumers. If companies want to raise prices, they can, because as shoppers, we don't have anywhere else to go. The store down the street is owned by the same company, and so they have the same, shelf prices as the other store. So if you look historically, companies want us to think that the bigger they are and the more higher volume that they purchase in, the prices are better for shoppers. But it just has not proved true historically. And I think the pandemic revealed this. Studies after the pandemic from the Roosevelt Institute and other places showed that corporations were gouging shoppers. They were using the pandemic to reap a windfall, and they were taking advantage of the crisis to make a profit. One way you can also tell what was going on is that corporations right now are doing buybacks to shareholders, especially retail companies. During the pandemic, Kroger did one of the largest corporate shareholder buybacks in its history. So they were making huge profits. And what did they do? They didn't raise wages for workers or lower prices for shoppers. They sent the money to their shareholders. And so that's another sign that this just simply isn't true. We actually need to enforce our antitrust laws in this country. We need to break up these giant companies that have so much power over wages and over prices. And that's one of the things that I learned while working in the store.
Here's kind of a pushback text. Listener writes, "This is the kind of liberal elite story cosplaying labor that infuriates the working class. My immigrant parents put me to work in their small business, stocking, cashiering, dishwashing, etc. And what I learned is humility. Customers don't see you as a person." So on the one hand, I think at the end of that text, the person is backing up one of your main points. Customers don't see you as a person. And yet they're criticizing you as having written a liberal elite story that infuriates the working class. I'm curious your reaction.
Well, the person is exactly right that on the job in the supermarket, it can feel very thankless and invisible. I've already mentioned how difficult the work is and how much injury is a factor. But what I would say is there's nothing inherently demeaning about customer service work. I was very proud many times to work in my store, and there were many positive relations between workers and shoppers. I think there's nothing wrong with humility. What I have a problem with is the low wages that these jobs pay and the physical injury that they make likely. I think, a lot of people that I worked with could not afford health insurance. So we're working in these very difficult physical jobs. And health insurance at my store, I paid $40 a week to be on my company plan. For many of my colleagues, that was simply too much. That's the kind of margins that we're talking about. So people couldn't even go to the doctor when they got sick or became injured. There were very, very few people that could afford to take vacation days. We have what one scholar called a no vacation nation, where people are working in these very difficult jobs for months and years, and they can never take a paid day off. About 1 in 4 U.S. workers can't take a paid day off. So I totally agree with the texter that these jobs are difficult and people don't see you as human. But that isn't a function of customer service inherently. It's a function of the precarity that these workers are laboring under.
Joe in Stanford. Actually, Joe, hang on a second. Because you're talking about this issue of dignity, and spoiler alert, that's the last word in the book, dignity. Gordon in Douglaston, I think, has a first-person story along these lines. Gordon, you're on WNYC. Hi.
Hey, thank you, Brian. You might recall I sang my song Whale Off on the summer solstice a few years ago. Brian, the great Gordie Howe, the NHL superstar, said he sat down every chance he had, which allowed him to play into his 40s in the NHL. So your guest is absolutely right about getting off your feet. But I was in the grocery store, and a very nasty customer was abusing the cashier. And I called the manager over and I said, you should train your people to say, excuse me, in a loud voice. You're being inappropriate. Let me help you solve your problem, or should I call security? And I was trained that you don't have to take care of every customer.
Meaning you should say, you're a bad person in our store. We're not going to have you back.
No, you're just inappropriate, and let me solve your problem. Or should I call security? It's private property, and should we call security? Why should you abuse this person? Why? It's like people when they call into call centers. They're abused left and right because they're hiding behind the telephone.
Right.
You're being inappropriate. You have a lack of coping skills, and you have a lack of conflict resolution skills.
As a customer, did you feel in the instance that you're talking about, was management supportive of the worker?
They couldn't say one word. They were dumbfounded. They didn't know what they say. They remained silent.
Gordon, thank you very much. I bet that sounds familiar, Ann.
It does. It does. Back to my metaphor of the split screen. There were many wonderful customers, very kind and gracious, and there is plenty. The caller is exactly right. There's plenty of abuse of customer service workers. I think I did some research on this. The instances of researchers call it incivility on the job are going up. Instances where retail workers, service workers complain about customer treatment, it's getting worse, that there are more conflicts in stores. And one of the things that researchers think might be causing this is just general economic inequality in society in general. When people feel like they're working, and I'm talking about people in the store and also shoppers, when people feel like they're working too hard for too little and they're unable to get ahead, they become depressed and frustrated, and people take out their frustrations on somebody who's available. And that is often the person who's checking you out at the supermarket register. That's just a fact that people become more frustrated and depressed and angry in their own lives, they look for ways to release their frustrations, and sometimes we're the closest thing.
And now here's Joe in Stamford, who says he's in a 4-generation retail grocery family. Joe, you're on WNYC. Hi.
Yeah, well, my father owned 2 food stores. One, you'd call it a bodega. They didn't call it that back then. And a medium-sized supermarket. And I can tell you that in New York City, there's another risk to supermarket employees, especially in smaller stores, which is crime. I mean, I worked at a store on University Avenue in the Bronx, and while I was there were, to my knowledge, there were 2 armed robberies in the place. And the second time, one of the owners was killed. So, yeah, it's a dangerous business, and for a lot of reasons. And I can tell you that it's a low-margin business, too, which really accounts for a lot of this problems with the pay. And I can understand your previous caller's point that, the incivility of the public. My mother was a cashier in one of my father's stores, and she wound up hating the public.
Joe, thank you very much. What would, in response to Joe or all the callers as we start to run out of time, what would dignity look like, to take the last word of your book? Are there policies? Should there be something in the law? What would dignity look like? What would make you think your book accomplished something?
Well, let me first tell you why the word dignity is the last word in the book, and why it's an important part of the conclusion, is that I'm really inspired by the civil rights movement. And Martin Luther King, just a little while before he died, he was in Memphis, Tennessee, and he was standing in solidarity with striking sanitation workers. And he gave a speech where he talked about these garbage collectors. And he said, and I'm paraphrasing, the person that collects garbage is just as important to society as the doctor who cures disease. And to me, this is a really powerful vision for a society where everybody counts. He said in that speech, the famous line from that speech is, "All labor has dignity." And I think that is a mission statement for the supermarket as well as our society. Another thing I'll say is that one of the reasons I wrote the book is to challenge this idea that we've heard from the last couple of callers, and I certainly understand where people are coming from when it comes to rude customer service experiences. But I want to challenge this idea that people on opposite sides of the check stand have kind of opposing concerns and that they're like enemies in this war over the grocery store. This is absolutely false. It's just simply not true that we can't have a supermarket where workers earn a living wage, where they're not injured, where they have unions. You mentioned which policies we'd like to see. Grocery workers are not unionized right now, and they really should be. That's one way they can have authority in the workplace. And we really can have supermarkets where workers are well paid, where they're unionized, where they're not being injured on the job, or where if they are, they can get help. And we can have good customer service where shoppers are well treated, where prices are fair, where wages are fair. This is totally possible if we come together and realize that we have these shared concerns and shared interests. And our enemy is corporate power and these corporate these leeches who take and take and take as much as they can from all of us.
If we had more time, I would ask you to tell the story of how self-checkout, which a lot of people consider recent development, goes back to 1916. But people are just going to have to get the book if they want to know that story, because we're out of time. Ann Larson, a fellow with the Economic Hardship Reporting Project, is now the author of Clean Up on Aisle 5, Essential Work, Poverty Wages, and the View from Behind the Supermarket Register. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC. All right, now to our 10-question quiz on the World Cup 2026. Have you been paying attention during the tournament? Got 2 in a row right and win a WNYC bucket hat. Jeff in Stamford, you're on WNYC. Hi, Jeff. Ready to play?
I'm ready to play.
All right, if you've been paying attention, then we can say this first one is just to see if you're awake. One team has already booked their trip to the final. Who is it?
Spain.
Spain is right. They beat France in the first semifinal yesterday afternoon. They will face Argentina or England, who play the second semifinal this afternoon at 3. Question 2 for a bucket hat. What venue is slated to host the 2026 FIFA World Cup final as known by FIFA?
New York, New Jersey Stadium.
That is exactly right. New York, New Jersey Stadium. People around here generally call it MetLife Stadium, but they're not allowed to use a company name, I gather, in conjunction with anything World Cup related, unless that company is paying the World Cup, FIFA, for a sponsorship. So it is New York, New Jersey Stadium. Hang on, Jeff. We'll take your address, and we'll send you a bucket hat. Next, Eric in Westfield. Hi, Eric. Ready to play?
I'm ready to play.
All right, another FIFA rule. Question 3. This one about political imagery. It forced one team to change their uniforms. Those uniforms depicted a scene from the country's revolution. The question is, can you name that country, that team or that country?
That's a lot harder than the first two.
It is harder than the first two, but that's the nature of contests. I'll give you a clue if you need one. I didn't hear that.
Sure.
I'll give you a clue if you need one, which is that revolution was not very well received by the United States at the time. Not so
Iran.
far from us. Ooh, sorry. That was a good guess, because not very well received by the United States. But it was Haiti. Haiti had to change their uniforms because they depicted a scene from that country's revolution. All right, next. Sean in Bed-Stuy. You're on WNYC. Ready to play?
Yes. What's up, Brian?
Okay.
Long-time listener. I'm very excited about this.
Glad you're on. Question 4. Which co-host nation had the tournament's youngest player, 17-year-old midfielder Gilberto Mora?
Mexico.
Mexico is right. Question 5
Give me
for
a
a
hard
bucket
one.
hat. Donald Trump, this may be an easy one. Let's see. Donald Trump faced political irony when he intervened with FIFA to overturn a World Cup suspension for U.S. men's soccer player Folarin Balogun, whose eligibility to play for the United States relies entirely on what constitutional protection? Do you understand the question?
Oh, that's confusing.
Okay, so
Wait, he got red carded.
Donald Trump faced political irony when he intervened with FIFA to overturn a World Cup suspension for U.S. men's soccer player Folarin Balogun. The question is, and this is why it was ironic for Trump, Balogun's eligibility to even play for the United States relied on birthright citizenship is right.
Yeah.
He was born in this country, even though his mother didn't want to bear him in this country. She was trying to get back to their home country of England, but she was so pregnant that, if I understand the story, they didn't let her on the plane. So he got born here before they went home, and poof, he's a birthright citizen. Okay, you win a bucket hat.
We blame Trump for the law.
That maybe it gave extra motivation to Belgium, perhaps, because they felt they were being cheated out of a suspension that would have benefited them. That is certainly possible. Let's see. How about Luke is up next in Manhattan. Hi, Luke. Ready to play?
Absolutely. Ready as I'll ever be.
Question 6 in this 10-question quiz. And this may be a hard one. This is probably one of the hard ones. Which 2026 World Cup team has the most foreign-born players on their squad? Multiple choice, though. The United States, Curacao, or Bosnia and Herzegovina?
Believe it's Curacao, and they're all Dutch-born.
Oh, that was the next question. You get a bucket hat. Boom. It was Curacao, where only one of the 26 players on the squad was born in Curacao. And yeah, the next question was going to be that since Curacao made the World Cup and made history as the smallest nation ever to qualify, where was everybody else in the squad born? And the answer is the Netherlands, which bore 25 of the 26 players. And it makes sense if you know a little bit about history, because Curacao is a Dutch colony. So way to go, Luke. Hang on. We're going to take your address off the air, and we'll send you a WNYC bucket hat. Laura in Brooklyn, ready to play?
I am.
Okay. Here is, what are we up to? Question 8 in this 10-question quiz. The World Cup has 3 official mascots, one for each host nation. Of course, the U.S., Mexico, and Canada are the host nations. Can you name the animal that's any one of the 3 mascots?
Yes, I think I can name all 3.
Ooh.
I think it's a moose, an eagle, and a leopard.
Absolutely right. A bald eagle for the U.S. Well, a jaguar. I don't know if that's the same as a leopard. But
I think those are technically the same, but I defer to you.
But somebody can look that up for us and text us. Is a jaguar the same thing as a leopard? But the question was, you only needed to get one. And yes, a bald eagle, a jaguar, and for Canada, a moose. They are Clutch, the bald eagle, Zayu, the jaguar, and Maple, the moose, to be really specific. So question 9 for a bucket hat. This is expected to be the final World Cup of a legendary South American player's career. Heading into the semifinals, he was one of the tournament's top scorers even now, with 8 goals. Can you name him?
Lionel Messi.
Lionel Messi is right. Superstar. And way to go, Laura. You win yourself a WNYC bucket hat. Hang on, and we'll take your address off the air. And, well, we only have one question left. So Marcel in Glendale is going to get the one question left privilege that we have in these quizzes, which, Marcel, if you only get one question right, because we only have one left, you'll win a bucket hat. Ready to play?
I'm ready, Brian.
And the question is, question 10, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security barred one team from staying overnight in this country for any of the World Cup matches, forcing it to fly in from Mexico, play, and fly straight back out the same day every single time. Which team?
I think Iran.
Iran is exactly right. For obvious, whether or not justifiable reasons. Marcel, way to go. You win yourself a bucket hat, too. Hang on, we'll take your address off the air. Okay, listeners, that was fun. Glad we were able to break it up a little with a 2026 World Cup 10-question quiz. A lot of you who called in have been paying attention, and the semifinal is 3 o'clock this afternoon. The final will be Sunday. That's a traffic story. If you're not going to the game, don't forget, Sunday at MetLife or New York, New Jersey Stadium. Thanks for listening to Brian Lehrer Weekend. We're back on the radio Monday morning at 10 a.m. In the meantime, follow us on Blue Sky at The Brian Lehrer Show, where there's always a conversation 24/7.
WNYC's journalism and storytelling is heard by millions of passionate listeners. Sponsors of our programming gain our listeners' attention and their respect. Learn about how your organization can support WNYC and WNYC Studios at sponsorship.wnyc.org.